going to talk about some basic mechanical principles that we're going to keep in mind throughout the entire exercise. First of all, pelvis rotation. So you see this in horses, and you see this in dancing, you see this in gymnastics. But what you don't want to do is end up doing this. This is something we end up doing a lot in fencing, especially if we're fencing, and then we start ending up falling forward too much. What we want to be working on in our solo drills is anterior pelvis rotation. So the forward lean might help get momentum going, but it's very hard to get the momentum underneath you and back out again. Generally for rotation, we want to for the rotation of the hip, we want to be pushing up a little bit, okay? The other thing is good arm extension. We want equilateral arm extension. We don't want this, we don't want this, okay? We also want to have nice solid wrists. We don't want to be doing a motion where we suddenly end up with our wrists like that, right? Or what's another really common one? Yes, that one, right? But we end up goosenecking it's better to loosen the grip a bit and keep your arms straight. Same thing with shoulders. We don't want to be having one shoulder drop forward, drop up, drop down. Those are all things that we need to have pretty much in the bag before we're doing variables, okay? And that can be 6 months' work. The first drill we're going to be doing is what I call samurai cuts. Because this is what you see in every samurai movie, okay? Anime, whatever. And there's a good reason. We're just going to square up, come down. What we're working here is just without rotation, keeping our pelvis up, chest back, shoulders open, head, chin up, looking nice and proud, and keeping a good extension, okay? Because one thing, what will happen is the moment you go and you screw up your edge alignment, you get a whoosh. Get it nice, you get a nice little whistle. I prefer using this is a Zurich museum replica from Regenier. It is a son of a bitch as far as sword wind. Most sharps are much more forgiving on sword wind than this thing, okay? Same goes for sparring. So, and you're just working on that, keeping everything engaged, up, down, up, down. Also, one thing to watch that you're not doing the woodpecker. Okay? The common thing is up, down, up, down. While you do that with footwork, exaggerating of course, you end up stumbling forward, and that's how you get those moments where you run into someone and you can't do anything else. Okay? Next drill that we'll be working on is what I call offside. Square up again, because most of this stuff will be working without footwork, because footwork is a privilege you earn. So, start, cut into long point. Make sure everything's good. Wind up into ox. Cut around your head, making sure you're keeping yourself protected. And come down here. Wind up into ox. And notice how I'm always keeping my hands and arms equilateral and in front of my sternum. Point around my head, bring it down. Turning in, turning out. Turning in, turning out. Turning in, turning out. Turning in. Okay? So now this can turn into a lot of things, right? you can turn it into cut, wind, right? You can turn it into cut, feint, right? You can turn, with a little bit of a difference in point orientation, you can turn it into cut, parry, cut, right? There's a lot of things you can do. So it's a very core movement that you can work a lot on without any worry of not using it ever. Another one, so we've got offside, where every time you cut, you go to the offside ox. Now I'm going to do same side. So as you cut, I'm going to go to the same side ox. Important as you do this to think about the fact the power comes from the coiling and uncoiling of the body rather than the arms. The arms are loose, they're here for targeting. If my arms are loose and able to change, I can change movement mid-strike, because this rotation powers both an overhaul and a twer and an untertwer. No, there's not but if I'm pushing with my arms, then I have to decelerate and then start a new motion. Okay? Now, we're going to do crosswise. So, it's building on the same side movement, in a way. We come up, cut, come up to the same ox side we came from, we're going to bring it back, then we're going to cut from the opposite ox side. So we're going to come up here, cross, here, 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 here. Okay? Very simple. You can do these in many different ways. You can do them quickly. You can do them slowly. You can add many different kinds of footwork. But I would really suggest that before you add footwork, that your hips are powering the movements. Because once your hips are powering the movements, you can use many different footwork types in order to create that movement that you need and that momentum from the hip. If not, we tend to use our feet to drag the hip rather than the hip initiating the movement. The next one we'll be working on is what I call around the clock. So we're just moving through hangers. And what we're working on here is that we're keeping our shoulders back and our posture good and our arms equally extended. As we're kind of moving around this circle, you'll feel it as you do it, that there's a circle of extension, right? Okay, so those are some simple drills that we'll be working with. There's also some techniques we'll be working with, such as tverhau, schielhau, krumpau, streichen, different elements that we'll be using a little bit more, absetzen of course. These you can also add, again, adding footwork and changing around where you're going, okay? We'll be adding variables in order to define where we'll be going with those things. So I'll be running you first through a few different drills that I use for myself and for my students to improve their biomechanics and to get them moving like a fencer. Once you move like a fencer, there's a lot of things that you can do just easily. You don't have to learn the movements so much, they just happen, okay? So, a few things to think about. Anterior pelvic tilt. So, you don't want to be putting your ass out here. That ends up kicking you forward and it loses you reach. It gets you nice momentum forward, but you end up kind of tumbling. It's okay, but if you end up pushing your pelvis up, your drop set becomes much longer. The other thing to think about, equilateral extension of the arms, right? You don't want to be chicken winging, right? Even if you cut here, see, that's a common one. If you end up doing this, it means you didn't move with the blade, okay? You also don't want to end up leaning forward or a shoulder kicking out, right? That's a personal habit of mine from years and years of doing it. Boom, right? So first thing you want to be doing is samurai cuts, as I call them, because it's what you see in every anime and every samurai movie. Okay, and that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a nice whistle. If you hear, you did it wrong. Okay, that's an extreme example. I prefer using something like this. This is a museum replica of a fader in the Zurich Museum, done by Regenier. It's very, very strict on the sword wind. Even if you use a sharp, a lot of times they'll be much more forgiving in sword wind than this thing is. You can see it's got a very, very thin tip and it's wobbly. So if you get it wrong, you hear about it. Okay, so once you've got those down, these are easy because there's no rotation. You don't have to match the rotation of the body to the line of the cut. Once you have those, come here. I'll just also do a just so you see them a bit. Now that you've gotten a little bit of just straight, just both sides working those, okay? Until you can be pretty confident of getting a nice sword whip. Now, once you've done that on both sides, you can start adding a little bit more complicated techniques. Or complicated. These are what I call offside. You'll see why. Stand square, because we're not going to be doing footwork. Footwork is a privilege that is earned by good hip movement. Work on your footwork separately with ladder drills, etc. And then once your blade works good, add the longsword. So I'm going to start here, dip it around, come here, and this is what we call offside because I'm moving my ox to the opposite side, I cut. See, my point is keeping on target. My strong is moving in front of my head, and I'm cutting with a twist of my body. Here. And I'm hopefully getting a nice sword wood. Here. Again, we start here. See how I'm starting with my body basic at 90 degrees in order to maintain a nice alignment with my sternum. If your hands are in front of your sternum, you can be fairly confident that you've got a nice 90-degree and a nice even extension in the arms, and it also means that you've got a good hook between your core rotation and your arms. If I'm here, my core will kick in, and then it'll be a while till it reaches here, and it may not even. If it's nice in here, I can reach, cut, up. I'm twisting into that. Cut, twisting in, cut, twisting in, cut, twisting in, cut, okay? All about this, and once you start doing that, you actually end up with a bit funky footwork like you start seeing in the fencing manuals, where they're always standing and doing this kind of weird funky shit, because they're doing that in order to turn and unlock and build up rotational power. It's not a bad artist. So, Next one is what I call same side, because we're going to now move, cut, and move our ox, or our leg, into the same side we just cut from. Here. Oh shit, they're attacking here. Well, they left that space open again. Well, okay, they're going to attack here again. Boom. 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 Okay? Nice. Equilateral. Something that would stop an attack. Okay? Done. Okay? Now, we're going to do crosswise. So, we're going to come up, cut, came to the side, come to the side we cut from. Now we're going to do our second cut from the opposite shoulder. Now these are going to feel awkward and they're not going to feel nice, because you don't have a nice rotation in order to power these. What you would probably do is do a back step like that. In fencing, you'd probably, once you add footwork, you do cut. Here, step behind. And you see that in fencing manuals too. So, the next one you'll do is, this you can do about the same time you're doing the samurai. They're a great one to do. Around the clock. And all you're working on is maintaining equilateral. Just moving in both directions and figuring out there's a circle around you where you can actually maintain power and push. Where you're kind of like at this golden ratio of not too close in that you'll collapse and not too far out that you're kind of starting to lose your alignment. Okay, so those are some of the ones besides your basic Trehau, Krumpau, Schielhau stuff that we'll be working on. And all these things will improve your Trehau, your Krumpau, and your Schielhau. We don't talk about Schielhau. Ever. Okay, so I talked about 5 variables that we can work with. Distance, momentum, timing, target, technique. Okay? So, you have your basic static pels, which are cool for some things, but they don't add many variables in, right? If you want something that's very static, that you can just do reps on and build the muscle memory, they're good. However, if you want something that will move a little bit and make you react and work your footwork, a hanging pel is something good. So I can just do these basic offside. And they'll force me to have to react. I can use these. I can try and time my things to use it as a thrust. I can use the momentum here. For example, I can choose to attack, and at the moment I feel that coming in, I strike to the other side as if it was a hard bind, right? You can use this motion to simulate a weak bind by moving through, right? If it's moving away from you in that moment, it's basically the same as a weak bind, right? Oh, he's leaving the bind, I'm going to keep on him. If he's pushing into it, I can use the momentum and cut around, right? Pretty simple. I can come here, use it as a feint. I can come, cut, and then see if I can use that here, right? But it will force me to move, right? It will force me to figure out what's happening. I can do it with my eyes closed. That's a good one I would suggest. That as you're doing this stuff, you try and feel where the momentum is, and then you react to it, okay? Feel where it's going to go. It'll help build up a bit of a tactile sense. No, we're not playing that game. So, you can also choose to attack, thrust, clear, thrust, clear, thrust, clear, thrust, clear, thrust, okay? And the other great thing is once you have a hanging pel, if you notice, I have it on a loop. You can add different kinds of sticks. You can have a really heavy stick, you can have a light stick, you can have a beach ball in a sack, you can have anything you want. They'll give you different values that you have to calculate. Now, the next step is we're going to do what I call a double hanging pel. Okay, so this is what I call a double hanging pel. Now, the basic concept is, this is the sword, this is your opponent. Okay, so as we'll be working on a lot of things of clearing this opponent, attacking, or clearing this sword, attacking, immobilizing the sword, attacking. Okay, or you can use get it swinging, and you can get your nachreisen going. So I can wait, clear on the outside, right? Here. And I calculated it wrong, right? So, and the more you hit it, the more erratically that thing will move. So, that will also help you bring in those variables. You can choose how much variable you want, or the range of the variables, better said. So, if I can also work single time counters. For example, I can go for a shield, or I can try and, now that I've got a nice momentum going, throw, right? Boom. See so you can see, would I be able to stop it? Because the basic concept of longsword is always pinning, maneuvering. Pinning, maneuvering. You have your artillery or your machine guns to pin down the enemy, immobilize their active element, and then if you can get to them with this and strike them, you're grand, okay? So you can do sweeps, right? See if that comes into see about attack, do things like attack, and then go for a hand. So what I would suggest doing with this thing is either a very specified, I want to do this technique, or to do Tabata drills. So just find a Tabata app and do high intensity striking the thing, and then just basic sword movement on the off time, and then striking the thing. The other thing you can do is, see here on the bottom one, now we've got two variables. It's spinning. So I can try and decide, I want to not only be able to defend this thing, but also thrust within the spinning movement of the tire. It's a nice gentle spin. If you're doing it with a much stronger spin, things become even more interesting, okay? You can add rules for yourself, such as every third or fourth strike needs to be to the legs. Why? Well, you can see why on mine. I don't strike at the legs enough. Otherwise, it would be nice and evenly destroyed. So, you can add in an even smaller target behind. You can change the widths. You can just, again, work on our very simple strikes that we've been doing. So now, as I come in with my offsides, I can work in 1, 2, 3. Come in here, see, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Now we start getting into a little bit more mixed up because you start having to react to what's going on. You can change your time, you can change your footwork, but it makes you work things that you wouldn't normally plan to do. And that's what sparring is. Things you didn't plan to happen. Okay, so the last couple of ones we've been working on, of the 5 different variables, we've been working on timing, and momentum and distance. Or sorry, not timing, just distance and momentum. It can change the momentum, or we have to calculate it based on what has happened prior, and the distance, we have to calculate how that will change based on the momentum. But there's no reason why we have to do it a certain time or not, except maybe that we won't be in distance. But it's a pretty soft and forgiving one. It's not the same as, oh, that opening is going to be gone, or that opening happened now, right? Target hasn't even really, target's kind of been a thing, but it hasn't been moving so much. We haven't been told, oh, he's good at attacking this bit, rather than this bit. We have to move our strike a little bit lower, a little bit higher. I'll be adding something else next for that. But what we can add now is timing. And timing is one of the most tricky ones to add and the hardest ones to do, because the way you can think about your strikes and your body is getting ready to go on vacation or on a trip. If you're not used to going on a trip, like none of us are now, or maybe you've got somewhere where you travel, but you know, normally you're ready to go out, you've got your wallet, you've got your phone, you've got everything ready, and it's just boom, 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 boom. But now we don't go out so much, so we have to look for everything. We don't have a grab bag. Our body has to be trained in order to go, oh, ready, go, right? So we're not looking for everything and getting this shoulder back a little bit, the sword up a bit, this down, get the pelvis under us, and then we're ready to launch the strike. No, by the time that happens, everybody is gone. Okay, so what I use, or would suggest, there's different timers, but what I use is something called, an app called the Randomity Timer. It's a very simple one, but it has a minimum time between beeps and a maximum time between beep. And it has 2 different options that you give it. So it's, for example, I have it now set to change and thrust. So I just set that and make sure I've got it nice and loud.
Change.
So it starts and I get myself settled.
Thrust. Change. Thrust.
Now to change the other side.
Thrust. Change. Thrust. Change. Thrust.
Okay, so the last couple of ones we've been working on the 2 different variables of momentum and distance. The next one I want to bring in is timing, because there's some timing there, not that much, okay? Oh, maybe it changes and stuff, but it's more like calculating distance of, will it be in distance at the moment that I want to strike? That's a timing aspect, but it's not the same thing as, now go. Okay? And that's the thing that's hardest for us to get back into in sparring, I feel. That opening happens and you're thinking, oh, that opening happening, and then boom, it's over, right? It's gone, they attacked, something changed. So what I use is a random app timer. This is called the randomity timer. And it's very simple. It's got a minimum amount of seconds between change and a maximum amount of seconds between the change or the signal. It's got two different options that cycle between the two. Right now I have change and I have shield. Okay, so now I'm gonna get myself set here. Start this thing, and I'm gonna get ready here.
Shield. Change.
Change the other side.
Shield. Change. Shield. Change. Shield. Change.
Ah! A little bit early.
Change. Shield. Change. Shield. Change. Shield.
Okay, so that was a little bit, with the double pel and timing, is a little bit complicated because we're adding three different variables at the same time, right? That becomes quite tricky. And it may not be what you're ready for yet. But there's not just the momentum of the target, there's your own momentum that we have to deal with. Because you may be a little bit more forward than you want to be, or you might be a little bit too back when you want to go forward, etc., right? So we're gonna add a couple different options. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna have the random timer, and instead of having shield, I'll have change and offline. Okay, so now, as I move up and down, the timer will tell me to go either back change, so change my forward movement, or it'll tell me to go offline, and I need to then, at that point, as soon as possible, get a little bit offline. Okay, so we're just going to work that a bit.
Offline.
I think I'm just going to keep it close to the camera.
Change. Offline.
So I'm just going to be doing flow drills here.
Change. Offline. Change. Offline. Change. Offline. Change. Offline. Change. Offline. Change. Offline. Change. Offline.
I think that's enough. Okay, so we've talked about three of the different ones, or 4 possibly. But the next one to talk about is target and technique. Now, you can get different timers that have more options. But one thing that I tend to prefer is I listen to podcasts as I solo train. It keeps my brain a bit more busy, especially if I'm doing just basic drills. If you're doing something a little bit more hardcore, sure, listen to music, but I tend to listen to podcasts. So one way of doing it is, if you find a podcast that you're listening to, every time a word begins with a certain letter, like T for tverhal, or a thorn sound, a th for thrust, an S for shield. And then as those come up, it's quite nice for you because it's taking up basic processing power, same as you would be in sparring, because you've got background programs taking up your processing power. Background programs like, what if I lose? This guy's big. Ow, my elbow hurts. That judge is an idiot. Those are all background programs that are running, taking up your processing power. There's a collie around me. All things that just nag a little bit at what you have in order to concentrate on what's going on. So by having that thing of listening to what's going on in the podcast and also having to listen for those signals, it's there. You can also do the same thing with what you use for targeting. For example, you can go and words that begin with H for head, and you choose one technique. Words that begin with H for head, B for body, L for legs. You can choose row them up. So you hear an L word, and then the next word you hear is an S word. So then it's legs, shield. That's weird, but hey, who knows? Maybe it's worth trying. B, body, and then tver. So it's going to be probably a low untertver. So that gives you things where you're not making the choice, because the thing about sparring is if you're leading the dance, great, you're making the choices. If not, then you've got a problem. And even if you want to lead the dance, you need to find out first what's going on and where you can threaten him. How much energy to use on that threat, because often we threaten with too much energy and it overloads people and they just go to their basic movement, which is the noob mittelhau, okay? And if you push someone into the noob mittelhau or just cut, they didn't have enough processing power to realize that you're there. So this will help you learn to be a little bit more aware of what's going on around you. So right now before we worked on a fairly static beat or timing variable, right? We were quite static. We were waiting to attack, right? But that's not how it works. We had the momentum of the things going on, but generally we have our own momentum. We're moving across our fighting surface, and he's going forward now, and we want to make distance backwards. We've been going backwards, and now he's backing off. We want to go forwards, right? And then there's the knowing when to launch the attack throughout that movement, right? So I'm going to be now changing the different signals in the timer to change, so changing forward or backwards movement, and offline. And I'm just going to be doing a continual sequence that we've been working on, okay? So I'm going to do the offside as they're a nice simple one, and I'm going to do offline. And when I do offline, I'm going to try and hold whatever ox position I am, or if you want to call it a lager position I'm in, and turn that into a thrust, so to speak.
Change.
I'm actually going to give this to the camera so it's a little bit easier to hear.
Change. Offline. 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 Change.